Shout out to G-Man Boxing.
Interesting read here from Daniel Dubois. Right, it's an article that he gave with Mail Sport, which is part of the Daily Mail in the UK. He's been talking about, certain fighters. He's also been talking about his comeback, we don't have an exact date on that. It's an eye injury that he suffered. You would imagine that is going to be prolonged a little bit because, the eye is a very sensitive part. You want to make sure that's 100% good to go before you start taking shots with it again, even if you're fighting the low-level opposition, which I would imagine they do. He's got a new trainer. He's come back off that loss to Joe Joyce. So I'd imagine it'd be kind of fighting the Ebenezer Tetes, the Fujimotos of the world again, before we see him maybe step up through the gears. Who knows? He is still quite young. Interesting thing I want to read here with Daniel Dubois. This is what he said on the people who criticised him after his defeat to Joe Joyce. I'm going to quote Daniel Dubois here. He says, "They all attacked me. All the big boys on TV. They knew what the situation was. They could have been a bit more empathetic. Was I hurt by it? I have a stone heart. They slag you off, and now it's happening to me." I know there was a few people who were critical. I think Dillian Whyte. Was it Carl Frampton as well? I know Andy Lee, I think, was more sympathetic, but I think Carl Frampton was a bit critical towards Daniel Dubois for quitting against Joe Joyce. Now, know me on this channel that I've always been very lenient on fighters who quit. There are some fighters who've quit. I haven't actually covered their fights, but for example, when I watched Sean McComb quit against Gavin Gwynn, that I was raising some eyebrows with because it wasn't as damaging a fight. He wasn't necessarily injured. I don't know what his situation necessarily was, but he kind of did one last gasp to try and get himself into the fight. When it didn't work, he just said, "No, enough's enough." That right there is kind of like an eyebrow raiser. But when you're looking at someone like Dubois, who has an injury, which could be a serious injury, which could cost him his sight, if I've not been in that situation, right? I done fuck all as an amateur, right? I wasn't good enough, simple as, right? And I didn't have the dedication, right? I wasn't disciplined. It's just when things outside of boxing would get on top of me, I just said F everything, So that's why I done absolutely fuck all. I was never in that position where I had an injured eye, right? I've never been in that position in my life, so I don't know how I would have reacted, right? Obviously, I've never fought pro either, but I don't know how I would have reacted. But do I begrudge someone for quitting to live to fight another day? Knowing that they have an injury, knowing that, it could cause long-lasting damage if I don't stop now. Of course not. Daniel Dubois, that eye was swollen quite bad. The doctor said, it could have been, more serious if it carried on. I don't begrudge him that. I'm not going to hold that against him. Certain people will. They'll look at that and think, he's got a bit of quit in him, if I put it on him, he'll fold. It's not always the case, Again, different if it's a fight. Look at someone like Eric Molina, right? He folds fairly quick when the tough gets going. That's just his mentality. It doesn't have anything to do with injuries. He's just not got that fighting spirit in him, right? That's fair to say. Vitaly Klitschko, when he quit against Chris Bird with a shoulder injury, you had Larry Merchant questioning his heart. You had people openly questioning Vitaly Klitschko's heart until he fought Lennox Lewis. And it was two cuts. It was one above the eye and one kind of on the cheekbone. It was bleeding profusely. It was deep. The cut above the eye was very deep. That was one of the worst cuts I've ever seen. People talk about Tyson Fury's cut being bad. That was way worse. I'm surprised, to be honest, I'm surprised that fight went on as long as it did. Because he got cut in the third round and it went 6 rounds. They stopped it just before the 7th. I'm surprised it went that long, to be honest with you. But Vitaly showed that he does have heart. Fighters get injured in the ring. We don't know. I don't know what Daniel Dubois was feeling when he got that eye injury. It could have hurt like hell. He could have been seeing groggy. He could have been thinking of all sorts of things. I wasn't in that position. I don't know what I would have done. So I'm not going to begrudge him, So when I hear people coming out and, saying, oh, he's a quitter, he's this, and, that's just like, come on, man. How do we not know other people in that situation wouldn't do the exact same thing? So I don't begrudge Daniel Dubois that. He's obviously having a go at the people who have, he's not naming names necessarily. I know when he's talking about opponents, he's mentioned Dillian Whyte. I think he actually goes on to say here, I'd like to get in the ring with Dillian Whyte and show him just how much of a quitter I am. I think Dubois, even before Joe Joyce, has mentioned Dillian Whyte's name before. I think now, Dubois versus Whyte, certainly not now. I think Dubois needs a lot of work. I think that training with Mark Tibbs is going to be a good thing, because what was the guy's name? Something Bowers. Was it Stephen Bowers or something like that? Or something like that? The guy who was managing Dubois was also training him. Martin Bowers. Now, I think that moving to Mark Tibbs, who's a full-time coach, and is a good coach, very good coach, is going to benefit him. I think that Daniel Dubois, in certain pics I've seen of him, he seems to have that smile on. He seems to almost be kind of coming out of his shell a bit. Like, I seen a picture of him with Ali Drew, and he did seem to be kind of, just not that, how do I put it? He always came across as just very, I don't want to, cold's not the right word, but just, very to the point almost. When you see someone, it's just like they're just so direct. Dubois in that picture looked a little bit more kind of, just had that calmness about him. So maybe being in an environment, a new environment, I felt that he needs to be in an environment where he's surrounded by people who are kind of a bit jovial. So like they'll bring out that little bit of, humor side in him, something like that to just get him out of his shell a bit. Maybe he's training with Billy Joe, because Billy Joe and Tibbs are obviously training together. Maybe Billy Joe, I know, is a guy who can, he's humorous to say the least. So maybe that's benefiting Daniel Dubois as well. But with him coming back, we need to see how he looks. Like that, fighters will look at Dubois and think, is there quit in him? If I put it on him, will he capitulate? Will he quit? It remains to be seen. We'll need to find out. I think Dubois, genuinely, I do think he has some fighting heart in him. And I've always been very keen on that, watching Daniel Dubois. I thought that against Joe Joyce, when I really looked at it, this is before the fight, Joe Joyce might have been a bridge too far, and it might have been a bit too soon. He's only 23 years old. It's crazy to think. It seems like he's been around for years. But he's still only 23 years old. I think that Daniel Dubois still needs that little bit of work. Maybe he was brought along a bit too quick. Maybe to bring him back down to British level, let him, get his feet kind of wet there, and then slowly bring him up. I think that Joe Joyce was a bridge too far at that point. But I think that moving forward, they can learn from that. I think Dubois still has a lot to give the heavyweight division. He's still a good fighter. He wasn't knocked out cold by Joe Joyce. He wasn't necessarily concussed by Joe Joyce. It was an injury, and he took the knee. So for him moving forward, you could say, and those 10 rounds with Joe Joyce will have done him good. I know maybe physically they won't have, but it will have done him good from experience wise. So I think for Daniel Dubois moving forward, there is some good there. I can see some good there, and I still have a lot of hope in Daniel Dubois. I really do. I've always been, ever since I seen him very early on in his career, there was a lot of things I liked about him. There was things that were confusing about Daniel Dubois, not from a technical point of view, because he's just very shy. He's like an enigma. He just doesn't, it's very difficult to gauge someone when they don't give much away. Like, sort of way, like, and I've met people like that who haven't given much away, but the more you get to know them, the more you can kind of see why, and the more you can kind of understand it. But with Dubois, and obviously I don't know him personally, so it's a lot more difficult for me to gauge, where he's coming from. But for Dubois, he's been around for so long, he still had, maybe God knows what he might be like now, but prior to like 2021, he always had that just mystique about him, and he's just very hard to gauge. Extremely difficult to gauge, but we'll need to see how he looks. Like I said, we'll need to see how he looks under Mark Tibbs when he comes back, who he fights, what level he sticks around at, and just how he looks when he comes back in there. Get rid of the demons, just off the cobwebs, and see how it goes. Calling out Dillian Whyte, maybe a little bit premature, a few years too soon, but you never know. I'll tell you one thing, Dubois, I wouldn't pick him over Dillian Whyte, but I sure as hell would be betting money that he has enough power to hurt Dillian Whyte, and seriously hurt him. Make no mistake about that. Anyway, I wanted to keep this video short. It's gone way longer than that, but let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button. Subscribe, of course, if you're new. Still can't get, I need to find a new hashtag. We will find something, because I always ended it with hashtag you know what, but we can't do that anymore. So we'll find something. But anyway, for now, I'll talk to you. Peace.